Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with a really interesting reissue boxed up quite conveniently on the CPO label, Boccherini 24 Quartets. Now, I've been doing a lot of Boccherini lately, as you may, well, a lot, three videos, but, comparatively a lot, because he's such a marvelous composer and some stuff has come out, and I'm very happy this is back because there aren't that many recordings of Boccherini string quartets, and he wrote like nearly 100 of them, maybe more. He wrote a lot of chamber music, and he was one of the great quartet composers of the 18th century. They are almost exactly contemporary with the quartets of Haydn, maybe a little earlier, and they're wonderful works in their own way. They're written in a slightly different style, and for that reason, everybody kind of dumps on them, but they have their own virtues, and they are really considerable. And I would like to just take you through this set. It's particularly interesting because these quartets are played by three different ensembles, two of which play normal instruments and one of which plays period instruments. And I don't need to tell you which ones I tend to prefer, even though there's nothing wrong with the period instrument performances. They're really not bad. The groups are the Sonare Quartet, the Nomos Quartet, and the Revolutionary Drawing Room, which is actually the name of a quartet. It's not a place. But so you get to actually compare the approaches and the sound of the different instruments. And we will draw some conclusions once we are done. Let me just tell you what's in here. Let's start with that. Now, Boccherini's quartets are very interesting because later in his life, in any case, he wrote in large opuses and small opuses, or large opera and small opera. That is, he wrote short, simpler works for domestic use of more amateurish people, or at least people with shorter attention spans. And then he wrote full-fledged 3 and 4 movement works. The littler ones are usually in 2 movements. And so he has, opus petitum, or opus, littlum, or whatever the Italian word is, diminuendum, and opus grande. I know it's grande. So let's see what's in here, shall we? We start with 6 quartets, opus 2. So we're right at the beginning of his quartet universe. Let me see if it says here when these things were written. Well, I have to find the English, then I have to see if it's big enough to actually read. Boccherini's Leben Lichtlen S. No, that's German. Sorry about that. I should have done this in advance. I'm sorry, folks. Yep, there we go. Opus 2. Very, very important. The beginning of the Romance developmental line in the history of the string quartet. I have absolutely I have no idea what that means. No clue. But they were written in 1761. That's really early. That's as early as Haydn's earliest quartets. Maybe even a little earlier. That's really remarkable. So they're important. They're important works historically, and they're just lovely. Oh, they're so beautiful. These are 3 movement works. They're not tiny. For 14 minutes. Now, one of them here is 10 minutes. One of them ends with a fugue. Take that, Papa Haydn. He's got a fugue at the end of one of them. And then some end with minuets and other things. They're just beautiful. They're beautiful, charming works, and that don't require a lot of effort to listen to. They're sunny and melodic and beautiful. They're very nicely played here by, who is this, the Sonare Quartet, or the whatever they're called? Yes, the Sonare Quartet. They do it. I hate it when labels break up all the information. The performers are on the back of the box. The pieces are here. Anyway. It's a minor blemish for video purposes, So, CD2, we have Quartets Opus 33. I'm not going to bother with the date. All you know is that they come later than Opus 2. So, and these are also, let me see, Opus 32, pardon me. Opus 32 numbers 4, 5, and 6 are on CD2. And then on CD3, let's see who does CD3. That's these other people. Okay, fine. So that these are bigger quartets, but we don't get the whole opus. We only get 3 of them. These are also 3 movement works. One of them, well, 2 of them are 4 movement works. So we're getting into the normative classical quartet area with these quartets, and they are played by the Nomos Quartet, not a period instrument group. And the performances are quite lovely. Then we get the rest of it. 3, 4, 5, and 6. The next 4 discs, yes, are all with the revolutionary drawing room on period instruments from the scratch and scrape school of string playing. I mean, I'm being cynical because they like I said, they're not as emaciated and desiccated sounding as a lot of today's quartets pretending to play on period instruments. No, they really play. They really play them. And once you get used to the sound, which is radically different from the first 2 discs, I think everything goes pretty well, actually. So we have Opus 33, numbers 1 through 6. These are short quartets. These are the little ones in 2 movements. You get an allegro and then a rondo, or an allegretto and a minuet, and an andante and a presto, and something called andante lentarello. Yeah, lentarello. It's like limoncello. It's like a liqueur, and they're really very, very charming. And because they're short, it doesn't mean that Boccherini, he's one of those good composers. He didn't have to dumb things down. And his style is always very, very colorful, and he keeps things moving with, lots of little devices like syncopated rhythms or odd phrasing, things that go where you don't quite expect them to. So they keep your ears perked up, even when the texture is really quite simple. So those are lovely. And then we've got on CD4, Opus 39, which is what looks like 1 quartet in A major, a 4-movement piece, about 20 minutes long, a big work. And then Opus 41, numbers 1 and 2. Those are in C minor and C major, and they're obviously written to be played together as a pair. Now, one of these, the C minor one, or is it the C major one? The C minor one is fascinating because it's in cyclical form, and this is from around 1770. In other words, the first movement is also the last movement, but not all of it. It returns in a abbreviated and slightly altered version to serve as the finale. And so you have a real frame for the entire work. And, people tend to diss Boccherini because he did not indulge in the kind of motivic development that Haydn and the other, Viennese classics indulged in. But he had his own way of making sure that there was cyclical unity in a large-scale work. And it's just as valid, it works just as well as anybody else. And, Boccherini, we talk about him being Italian, and of course he was, and he spent most of his later career in Spain, out in the backwoods, which was sort of a cultural backwater in those days. But the interesting thing about Boccherini is that he was actually trained in Vienna. He and his father both played the cello in the Viennese court theaters. He was friendly with Gluck and knew that music extremely well. And so he was perfectly familiar with the Viennese classics, and he liked Haydn, and Haydn liked him. I mean, they didn't know each other terribly well, but they knew each other's music. So he was not as far out from the German classics as we would have one believe, or one would have us believe, or people would think, whatever. It's just that he had his own style, and a wonderful style it was. So CD5 has the quartets Opus 58 and CD6, also all 6 of them. And these are in either 4 movements or 3 movements, depending on which one you get. And it's a very serious set of works. They are really splendid pieces. I mean, Boccherini's chamber music is amongst the best we have from the 18th century, and it does not deserve its neglect. The problem is that there is so much of it, and it hasn't received any really systematic treatment. And until it does, it's going to be very, very difficult to form a picture of his achievement as a whole. But I think it was a very, very, very significant one. Tremendously beautiful music. And this box really does offer fun opportunity to hear different ensembles go to work on it. Now, one of the reasons I really, really enjoy normal instruments in Boccherini is because, as I've said before, he was a chord guy, not a line guy. He lived on, if you look at his scores, they are extremely carefully marked in terms of articulation, in terms of dynamics. He liked to use lots of different colorations. He used ponticello, which is, near the bridge of the instrument. He used sound effects in his music. He created amazing textures with just 4 strings. He really did. And he used lots of vibrato. He notated it, on occasion. He told us what he wanted. He used the term espressivo quite frequently, which was very, very unusual in those days. It was a new concept. And that meant, use vibrato. You need a certain sensuality of tone. A cantabile singing tone requires vibrato. There are period dictionaries that if you look up the word cantabile, it says to use vibrato. It tells you that. I am not making this up. This is what the scores say. This is what the sources say. This is what the period instrument people either ignore or don't know. So I prefer regular instruments in Boccherini for that reason, because they are trained to make the kinds of sounds that I think this music demands. And, there is what we think the period standard was, and then there's what Boccherini asks for, what the individual composer wants. And it's very clear what Boccherini wants. He does not want the average sound of the period. However well done it is, and here it's well done, I'm not criticizing it on that basis. He wants his own sound, and it happens to be a modern sound. That's how I feel about it. But I would listen to this anyway because it's, there just isn't a lot of choice, and because it's so interesting to make these comparisons. So it's Boccherini on CPO, 24-string quartets with the Sonari Quartet, the Nomos Quartet, and the Revolutionary Drawing Room. Keep on listening, friends. Thank you so much for joining me. Take care.